people are getting bored. These really talented technologists that can work on anything they want. They're getting bored working on these, modern problems, modern software, modern hardware. So the same thing here at Firestorm. You got really talented engineers you pull in because they're like, this is a cooler, more rewarding problem to work on.
This is Dan Magy, CEO of Firestorm and host of the Drone Wars podcast. And this week we have Jake Windle, investor/partner at Harpoon VC, and actually my first government customer 10 years ago. Jake, what's up, bro? How you doing?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming to our freezing mini XL here in San Diego.
It's nice. I like it.
I know.
Homey.
It's very homey.
Yeah.
Guys, it's 50 degrees in San Diego, which means like the whole city's about to shut down.
Love it.
So Jake and I have known each other for 10 years. He was actually one of my first customers when he was at NSW. And what we want to talk about today is kind of how, one, he used technology while in the military, stuff he wished he'd had, things he'd seen adversaries use. And then two, how he's transitioned that into a role as an investor at a VC fund, right? Pretty cool kind of story here. So Jake, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, so I did, we'll start at the beginning. I did 20 years in the military, retired in 2020, and then jumped into the venture world. I mean, there's a lot that led up to that, but I made Master Chief pretty early on. That's a senior enlisted rank in the Navy. And made that pretty early in my career compared to, at the time, I was the most junior Master Chief in the Navy. And looking at, you could do 30 years as a Master Chief. So I thought, dude, I want to sit here for the next 15, 16 years in the same role, pretty much at higher levels of responsibility for the commands that you're at, but in the same role, which it can turn into babysitting really quickly.
Yeah.
For general purpose forces in the Navy, especially. So I thought, no, I don't want to do that. So let's look at other options. Obviously, my day job is staff stuff. So you're pulling big levers for manning, training, equipping. Ran a special reconnaissance program of about 500 people spread across 2 coasts and worldwide for deployment. But I thought, you know what, I got to figure out what's next. And half of my brain is dormant doing staff work all day. Even the really creative, cool staff work doesn't take that long. It's not that hard. It's all process based in DoD. And once you figure out those parameters in that system, it's really easy to just ding, 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 work through it. And then after lunch, you're like, what am I going to do all day? Like, I've done everything. So, and there's a bunch of meetings and all that staff type stuff. But I had a buddy named Craig who was a seed investor in companies in San Diego. He was a Stanford software guy. Before that was the coolest thing you could do. He did a career at Qualcomm and then ended up playing tennis with him and having some drinks. And he goes, hey, man, I'm working with this company, early stage company out of San Diego. One of the guys there, he was in the SEAL team. His name was Brandon. And I was like, oh, I think Brandon's saying, right? I heard say he's starting the company. He was a Team 5 guy, whatever. And he said, yeah, his brother Ryan is really smart, has done a bunch of cool stuff, exited the company, he sold it back to Qualcomm, a serial entrepreneur. So we had a meeting a couple of days later. And that ideation session and some of that meeting basically provided the additional validation they needed from a customer perspective. And they went and started Shield AI and then kind of took off from there.
Yeah. So let's kind of go back 10 years, right? When you were still in, that's when we first met. And we obviously met in the context of counter-UAS, like phase 1. What were you guys seeing or hearing on deployment for how our adversaries were using technology against us? And then that was a really special time at NSW. You guys got after a lot of cool problems. I think Shield, Citadel, SkySafe, EdgyBees, Elroy Air, those are all companies that they all came through your shop. So like, talk about how you saw the bad guys using technology and you're like, holy shit, we need to bring this in, to let the good guys counter some of this stuff.
So a guy that preceded me in my position in Warcom was Carl. He went to an agency organization that funded new technologies for special operations. So they used agency dollars and intel-based functions, and they funnel money into special operations guys like myself, who were originally agency guys, but recruited into NSW to do very, very specific special reconnaissance-based jobs. So Carl said, hey, we're doing these limited objective experiments where we go in the field and experiment with actual operators for cool stuff. Give me some ideas. So my buddy John, who you know very well, another Master Chief buddy of mine, he said, hey, we need some of these drones. I'm seeing these hobbyist drones flying everywhere. We got to figure out, like, we could put them together, we can mess with them, but let's figure out what they're about, what their capabilities are, how do we exercise them. So we went to Camp Roberts up in Paso Robles, and we would go test these in the field environment and see what the parameters were. How do we get after this? And that was actually John's job at Warcom. He was a new technology development guy. Just, hey, go look at what's on the market, look at the cool stuff that's out there and figure out how we bring it back in. So we were messing with these drones. And John came back after a 2-week stint up there and said, dude, like, we're in trouble. He's like, if these drones that we have, we can learn how to fly them in a day or two, and we're running around doing drone battles one-on-one, just messing around. He goes, the bad guys are going to come up with really cool ways to use these. And he's like,
what year do you think this was?
2015.
Okay.
And he said, dude, I saw a fishing drone with a servo that you can drop your fishing lure way further out than you can cast. He's like, bad guys are going to use that to drop bombs. Like, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So we went back to Carl and said, hey, what funding do you have at the end of the year here? This is 2015, 2016 timeframe. He goes, dude, I got a couple $100,000 left over. What do you guys want to do? And I'm like, well, I met this dude named Dan. He's got a company in San Diego that has an autonomous process internal to their little radio stack that can identify and track signals of interest that are drone signals based on frequency hopping and other signal parameters that are sensitive. And then, we can track them and we can shut them down. We can hop to the same channel that the drone is going to hop to a microsecond behind it and inject some noise in the channel. So it can never find a clear channel and it goes away. It's automatically programmed to go home. We thought, hey, that's brilliant. And we took it out in the field and tested it. Worked great. So we figured out a way to put Citadel Systems on contract and push it into SOCOM. And then we said, hey, let's get Citadel Systems at these different, limited objective experiment events that we ran. That turned into a bunch of, you guys did a lot of good work at Citadel, turning that momentum into next level. And a couple of years later was probably a lot longer than it should have been. That should have taken maybe like 5 years later. Ended up as the SOCOM program record for a small tactical counter-UAS, which, if you think about it, we started with and you did a good job raising venture dollars there, right? I remember the guy I work with now, Larson Jensen, was at Lightspeed Ventures at the time, former CEO, Olympic athlete.
Yeah.
He's got a really cool story, but he was at Lightspeed at the time, left the SEAL teams, went to Stanford, went to Andreessen, and then went to Lightspeed. He came to the town looking for counter-UAS investments. He goes, who's doing counter-UAS? And everybody in NSW said, nobody. Because if you raise your hand for counter-UAS, that's going to be somebody's full-time job. It's going to be a big disaster. And Larson said, well, okay, well, what cool capability is there? If nobody's really doing it, you guys know about the capabilities. And they said, hey, this dude named Jake and John are just messing around with drones. So we had a meeting with him, and Lightspeed liked what they saw with us. And they said, okay, you guys probably, all else being equal, you probably have a better idea of what's going on operationally. And kind of took those notes to heart. They did a really good job of studying the environment. And then we introduced them to you guys, and they ended up making an investment. And it turned out well.
The rest is history. Well, let's talk about, like, in that time, we tried to do something together where you guys were like the tip of the spear. You ended up buying a couple $1 million of stuff. We worked hand in hand with you probably over 18 to 24 months, talking to operators in the field who are using it, bringing them back on rotations, making the UI better, like trying to simplify and make it as user-friendly as possible. But we ran into problems getting bigger adoption in the big Navy. And I'm sure you've seen this multiple times, right? And I'm sure part of it is you bang your head against the wall, and that's what it is. What does the DoD need to do better, right? When you get an early adopter of a technology who raises their hand and says, this is good, how do we push that to get the bigger services buying it? You know what I mean? Because we thought the program of record was going to be with the Navy. Yeah. It didn't end up there for a variety of reasons. Yeah. And ended up at SOCOM, probably a year or two after kind of it should have. But talk to us about that problem and how do we fix it?
It's a good question. There is no easy fix. It's a cultural problem, right? It's not a process problem. We showed that, right? We went to our procurement guys, the supplier and innate requirements, or the in-force supply guys. And we said, hey, like, how do we get after this counter-UAS to make sure all our guys have this? We've tested it. We know what everything else is out there. All else being equal, Citadel is a small, cheap, reliable solution for tactical units on the move. We've tested in the field. We've got all the data we know. And they said, ooh, we don't have any money for that. And SOCOM has a senior steering group that's trying to handle that. And the DoD writ large has a senior steering group. So I think it was 2019, the year before I retired, that the Marine general officer in charge of the senior counter-UAS senior steering group had a big meeting with his guys. And he goes, look, we've spent $3 billion on counter-UAS for Afghanistan. I'm still seeing reports all the time about successful small UAS, terrorists using small UAS successfully against our troops. He's like, why have we not deployed a capability to our troops commensurate with the amount of money that has been budgeted and spent and allocated, like allocated and obligated, like it's spent. And it's because a lot of the big primes, some did a really good job. A lot of the big primes took their counter IED jammers that they had on the shelf that they hadn't sold yet. They took them off and went blow the dust off.
Flip them upside down.
And then say, oh, look, this works for that frequency range as well. And the program manager said, and we've learned this with program managers in DoD, that there's some really good ones. And there's also some ones that do exactly what you would expect, where they do what's easiest for them to do programmatically. So do I have to do another 5 weeks of work to get this new thing approved? Or can I grab something that's on the shelf that's already approved for counter ID and just say, okay, well, this is counter-UAS, call it counter-UAS now. The name change is a lot easier than starting over for a new capability. And that's what a lot of guys were doing. Sure, you have to deploy a capability. Guys are getting blown up. You don't have any other ideas. As a PM, you're not incentivized to go do a really cool market survey and understand exactly what's happening, especially in the startup world where you don't have access to that data. Yeah. Those guys can be in stealth mode, or they're doing some really secretive stuff. So they don't need any help because they already raised money. But so you don't know about that. And there's really no way for the government system to incentivize guys to do better in this process. You can't give them early stage equity like you would in like an early employee at a company, or you can't give them a bonus for doing better. Right. They're incentivized to have stuff come on their desk and get off. It's funny, the analogy we use all the time is the checkout person at the grocery store, right? It's not a good idea for me to ask the checkout person about my dietary preferences. That's not their job. Their job is to bag up your groceries, have you pay the correct amount, and get you out the door. And it's a volume thing. Just keep the process moving. Right. If you ask the checkout person, they might have an idea about where to find, better steaks, or what kind of sauce should I put on my fish? But it's not their job. And most of them would look at you funny and be like, I don't know. Can I get your card or cash? How you want to pay for this? Like, whatever. It's not their job. So it's really hard to incentivize. And we figured out that you have to figure out a way to incentivize guys internally. You have to have those internal advocates. Citadel did a really good job, and you hired a guy that had internal access to some of the staff at the senior levels. And he said, hey, this is better than what everybody else is doing. Yes, they didn't show up to all your events that you put on over 2.5, 3 years, and where you do a bunch of innovation theater, we call it, where look at all the stuff that we're doing in the fake environment that's not really real. So you have to incentivize those guys internally. You have to figure out how to, and what we figured out was just like leadership. Like as a master chief, my whole job was to make more master chiefs, right? Mm-hmm. Make the guys behind me master chiefs so I can wrap what I'm doing up and move on. Yeah. And I know that I'm leaving there in a good position, but you have to figure out how to get those guys promoted internally. That's what we did. We're like, who are we going to tag with this to say, hey, this guy did all the work. Let's get him promoted. And then he'll work all day internally because he's got some stake in the game. Otherwise, it's just my normal GS salary, my normal, pay for your groceries, get out the door and move on. They don't care.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global headquarters in San Diego, California. Each episode is filmed inside our X Cell, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from unmanned industry leaders. Listen as they share the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and the bold predictions about what the next 5 to 10 years in unmanned systems and advanced manufacturing have in store for us. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show. I'm asking a question. I think you might have told me this once, but was it true like in that 2015, 2016 period when you guys were like desperately trying to bring new technologies in, you'd actually go on PitchBook and just look for companies or Google search?
Yeah. We would just say like, so we talked to DIU at the time, and they were, they had a bunch of money that freed up through Congress, and they said, hey, we need to do counter-UAS. We said, okay, let's go find some cool counter-UAS tech. And we literally just do a Google search because we knew what the big primes were doing. We'd already seen that. It worked 20, 30% of the time. Yeah. It was unsustainable. And it was way more expensive than it should have been. If it works 20% of the time, it should be, $20 grand for this box. And it worked 20% of the time, and it was $500 grand for the box. You're like, okay, this doesn't make sense. This price doesn't make sense with the level of capability it provides. So we had to go look for other stuff. And that's how, and then again, the same dude, Craig, was mentoring a company here in San Diego that was doing some cool counter-UAS stuff. And he made the intro, and I was like, wow, these guys are supported by a top level venture fund. They've got a great academic background. They know exactly what they're doing. And we got them a contract as well. And that was the cool part, where you have access to these pots of money that we developed that a lot of people might know about in DoD, but they're budgetary processes are such that they don't know what they're going to do with the money until somebody submits a proposal. So it's not like standard programmatics where my budget's programmed out 4 years from now. It's kind of like SBIR where nobody knows what's going to happen with the SBIR budget until somebody submits a proposal.
Yeah.
Which is good. You want that, you want access to that capital. So you're not having to go convince a PM, hey, stop buying this one thing, switch to this other thing. That's a lot of programmatic paperwork and approvals and reboarding and everything else. They don't want to do that. They're like, it's easier for me to just say, hey, good enough solution, get it out the door, which happens a lot in DoD and government at large.
Of course, right? Because it's the easy button that you push. Do you think DoD cares or doesn't care about just how many drones we've seen produced and used in Ukraine? Like, do they view that as now like the new normal, or are they still like, no, we're going to kind of think about creating our military to, we're going to kind of keep on our current path, how we've designed our military. You know what I mean?
I think there is an understanding that the ubiquity of these drones is going to be a problem, right? China's saying they want to develop a million kamikazes. A million drones just hanging out and waiting for somebody to hit the big red button, and then they darken the sky like, Persian arrows at the hot gates, right? Everybody's seeing that, but that could be a reality of those cheap drones doing that. And the reason why Ukraine's been so successful because it's a survival thing. It's a whole of country effort.
Right.
All the engineering talent, all the manufacturing talent, all of it is focused on all the GDP focused on this existential threat to survival. We don't have that in the United States. We're fortunately and unfortunately, we don't have to worry about heat and cold. We're a little bit cold in here, but we're really comfortable. We don't have to worry about where our next meal is going to come from or if a drone's going to fly in here and blow us up right now. The really small differences in between us as Americans. We're all in this amazing country. We're all doing great things together. We're pretty much the same. We all have the same baseline access to opportunities.
Totally.
But once you get past the normal everyday needs, that bottom of hierarchy of need, then you're talking about all these little things that really just distract us from some of the core elements of survivability as a country long term. And we've got these big oceans on either side of us. We could talk all day, and because we're relatively protected here in the U.S. in a good way, and we don't have to worry about literally somebody taking, like if Florida decides they want to go take over Alabama, Alabamans don't have to worry about that. They know that there'll be situations there to protect them, assets, the federal government comes in, all that. They don't have to worry about that, but that's literally what happened.
But so this existential threat that is Russia going into Ukraine, and these people and the Ukrainians kind of deciding that they're no longer associating with Russians, they basically had a whole of country effort. And, they have a lot of very smart electrical and mechanical engineers that have been put to task to be like, okay, how do we survive and or defeat an army that's 5 times bigger than us?
And we saw that with Citadel very early on, right? You had some really cool engineers that were like, wow, this is such a cooler and more satisfying, rewarding problem set to work on than an app that allows young people to share photos of their food faster. They don't care about that. Those things are so broadly adopted in the market that people are getting bored. These really talented technologists that can work on anything they want. They're getting bored working on these, modern problems, modern software, modern hardware. So the same thing here at Firestorm. You got really talented engineers you pull in because they're like, this is a cooler, more rewarding problem to work on. Like, how do we do national defense better, faster?
Mission's important, man. And people want to feel like they're part of something big.
Part of the incentive structure we talked about. Those incentivizing people, whether that's, you can incentivize them with early stage equity or money, but also just with the mission, like the incentives to have a broader mission that you're just a part of a big team.
Yeah.
Human beings like that. They like having a tribe that's all working together towards something. That's why you develop the types of friendships you do in combat, in the military, and do other things as you're working toward a common goal. And you don't have to worry about, I'm going to take a little bit of profit here. This guy's taking some of my stock here. It doesn't matter because it's not incentive based. It's all just, hey, I'll watch your back, you watch my back, and let's get this mission done. People like it. Yeah. But not having that in the political environment in the United States of people trying to sow distrust in between different groups, because then they can say, hey, you shouldn't trust these guys. I'm the only one that can deal with these guys. So elect me to be your rep, and I can go deal with this other element that really wants bad things for you. A lot of people have made it their goal in life to be that intermediary there. But you're not encouraging people toward a common goal. It's all just, here's all the things that separate us now. I can vouch for your stuff. I can vouch for your stuff, but you guys don't want to get together because it's bad. I need to represent you, which is kind of sophomoric and childish and stupid, but it also means that you can't get aligned the right way.
Yeah.
in DoD most of the time. The market is your customer. Like, who's paying the bill? Well, I don't need your permission because I'm not using your money. I use this other guy's money, so I have his permission to spend it on this. That's the whole point. Let's just retrofit that.
Easy button.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.